Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Online Warriors podcast. I am Illeagle 86. As always, I am joined by Nerdbomber and Techtic from across the digital void. How you guys doing this week?
I'm doing great, man. It's springtime. The weather is getting nicer. The days are getting longer. I feel like we always go through like a weather update in our intros. So
It's worth it this time, though.
guys, it's spring.
It's also allergy season. I want to make specific mention of that because, first of all, I think since we kind of do our little warm-up before we hit the big red button to record, and I've sneezed a handful of times. I've sneezed more times today than I have in the past 3 months.
Shout out to my throat for the
Shout out to Techtic's throat. I was just going to say.
ample clearing.
It was actually, you know that scene in Elf, the Christmas movie Elf, where he burps for like a minute long?
Yep.
And you're like, wow. Techtic was just clearing his throat it's uninterrupted for a whole minute before we hit the big red button here. So he should be good. There should be no more phlegm. Look at this. 1 minute in, I'm already talking about phlegm. But he should be phlegm-free. I should be sneeze-free. We'll edit that out probably if I sneeze. But it's allergy season. But the days are getting longer. I went on a run today, and I was outside.
Did you throw up?
Did not throw up. Did I tell that story on the air? Or was
You
that
did.
might have been-
You like alluded to it, but you didn't tell the story.
Guys, one of my first runs of 2021, I threw up on the street. That's look, no pain, no gain. All right, it was weakness leaving the body, or more particularly, it was Arby's leaving the body. Look, people didn't show up for these visuals. They didn't show up for phlegm. They didn't show up for Arby's vomit. So we're not going to talk about that too much more. We have to talk about some video game news today. We of course saw those PSVR2 controllers. We were going to talk about those. I certainly have some thoughts. We're going to talk about the announcements from Nerdbomber. You tripped me up here. You were saying Square Enix before we started. I'm a Square Enix man. I think it's an Enix. The girl in the video was also saying Enix, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. We're going to talk about Necromunda, which I think Techtic is pretty excited about.
Got to roll the R.
You can roll the... Yeah, I left that for you. You can roll the R. We're going to talk about Ace Ventura 3, because that's apparently coming down the pipe. So there's a lot to get into today. Let's talk about the PSVR2 controllers to start, because I have to tell you, I'm not like, it's tough because people who own a PS5, aka Nerdbomber and Techtic, I am not yet a PS5 owner. I've heard many, many great things about the controllers, the haptic feedback, the adaptive triggers. It's the talk of the town, the toast of the town even.
It literally made those controllers, the DualSense controllers, are my favorite gaming controllers ever. And
right.
Like, I think I said this on the show, like when I got the Nintendo Switch Pro controller, I thought that was like the best controller ever in my life. But the DualSense really, like, it pushed that out of the way. Like, that's a far, far second now to the DualSense.
It is interesting because I think before the Pro controller came out, I think most people were like, Xbox has the best controller. It's not even close. I'm not sure I agreed with that, but that was the predominant opinion. Then the Pro came out, and I think a lot of people thought Pro is the best controller, and now I think it is shifting back towards Sony, where the DualSense is king of the castle. And what I was reading about the PSVR2 controllers is that they're trying to incorporate a lot of those features, of course, considering how positive the feedback has been. We have these haptic feedback mechanisms, we have the triggers. It's certainly an upgrade from the Magic Wands for me, but I'm not feeling it. That's like I think I'm going to be the dissenting opinion here. I expect to be. It's too much. What is the design need? And maybe they mentioned this, but what is the design need for the loops, the big loops, you're carrying a lot of luggage. And I know they said it's light and it's the right weight and everything, but it just seems like you have this giant thing on your hand, this big curly swirly that I don't know what the point of it is. Techtic, do you know? Yeah, I have a feeling you might know.
So I think it's a step in the more intuitive space. And what I mean by that is going back to games like Iron Man VR and switching from the wrist rockets to the palm rockets, you're holding a stick, and it doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, translate well to those type of movements. And I think having the haptic feedback on things that you're intuitively grabbing and rolling your wrist and things like that is really the next step in the evolution of VR. And so me personally, I'm very excited about this, and I can kind of see the need for it.
Right. But the big swirly twirly. I mean, I agree. I go ahead.
The big swirly twirly, at least from what I know of like the Oculus and other VR systems that are more closely aligned with this new controller design, what I believe is the case for all of that is that the entire ring has sensors. So instead of having to rely on the orbs for motion tracking, you won't have to worry about that at all. Like if you put the controller behind your back, there's no light thing that a camera has to pick up on. The entire orb has all of the sensors on it, so it'll be more intuitive in terms of tracking. It'll be able to sense fine control and, I guess, movement of your hand better, is my understanding of that wraparound cage
with
design.
That, you could probably also get a lag time reduction, because with the orbs, you get a camera looking for the orb, interpreting that picture, translating it to motion, and then responding in your image or in your game. With the sensors right on the controller, you don't have such a long loop there. So it makes sense to me.
We should talk about competitors, because I think you mentioned Oculus, or maybe I imagine you did, but are Oculuses are the ones that have the little circle out in front, right? But they're not this big, are they? When I look at this, I see, old-timey swords that have the hand guards. That's what I see.
Is that a problem?
I guess I'm still deciding whether it is. I like the idea of it looks like it's very secure. I mean, clearly the wands have these too, but you have these wristbands. It looks very self-contained, but it just looks like they look kind of bulky to me. They're very fluid. Like it's clear that a lot of care was taken in the design, but I'm just wondering what it's all for. And I'm sure a huge part of it is what you're saying, the tracking and having this entire ring to track it. But then you have these big cross pieces, and I don't know.
Well, the other thing that I'm wondering too is, like you said, the other competitor products, they only have that ring kind of out in front. It's not encasing your hand. And I wonder if part of that might be due to like haptics and stuff like that. Maybe you'll be able to get different sensations on different areas of your hand. And I mean, I think that they said that these controllers will even have stuff like finger tracking, which I think is something that we've really missed. That I know, as a PSVR user, I know other systems have introduced finger tracking, and I haven't run into too many games where that's been an issue, where I'm like, darn, I wish I could see my individual fingers. But I think it could. I think it could be cool if you're like drawing on a whiteboard or something, or you can just like reach out and poke something. You know what I mean? I wonder if there's different technology that we just don't know enough about yet, because we don't have the full specs of these things. And I wonder if there's a reason for that more all-encasing orbital design.
I think finger tracking is absolutely necessary, and it is something that needs to be there for me personally. I take very serious games very not seriously. So when there's like important dialogue going on in the game, I'll sit there and like play with their ears or tweak their nipples and things like that. And Nerdbomber's watched me play before, and she'd just be like, "Would you just enjoy the game for the game?" It's frustrating.
And
to her,
you're like, no.
No, my response is I am. I mean, different strokes for different folks. But things like that would make it a little bit more fun and a little bit more nipple tweaky.
Here's another question. And I have to say, I think the answer for me is no, but I'm just curious. Do we miss the light? Is there any addition of coolness factor or functionality? But I mean, granted, these wands look ridiculous, but they have these big glowing lights on them that if someone else is watching you play, it's probably more interesting to watch when they've got these glowing lights on their hands.
I would say from a spectator standpoint, you definitely miss something, but when you're actually playing, you don't see those anyway, because you're inside a headset. You don't know that those are even a thing.
I'm going to be honest, as a spectator, it's entertaining watching someone VR either way. They look ridiculous. You don't look cool playing VR.
But I know the lights in the controllers. I mean, I want to say for the regular DualShock, and granted, I'm still back on the previous generation PS4. What can I say? I'm a traditionalist. But the lights on those controllers are a big deal because they indicate which player you are, and there's all kinds of things that they can do. And I don't know if that functionality would be missed in the VR context. Probably not. Like I said, my inclination is to say no. But think about that's another thing that I noted about it.
Think about the regular PlayStation controller for the PS5. Player 1 is blue, player 2 is yellow.
Right. So that's what I'm saying.
You still have designations within the home button on the controller, and I'm sure they'll include that there as well.
And I wonder too, like, I don't think you could ever have multiple people using PSVR headsets on a PlayStation 5. As much as there is a lot more power in the PlayStation 5 compared to the PS4. I don't know if it would be able to support the processing power for 2 headsets concurrently. So I don't know if that would even be... Yeah, I don't know if that would even be an issue because I think it would like probably explode if you tried to do it.
Yeah.
More importantly, it would be a safety issue between the two people flailing.
You're right, that too.
Could you imagine playing like a boxing game, like the Creed VR game, and accidentally actually whacking someone in the head if you're playing like one-on-one with them?
Well, Tactic would just be over there tweaking his own nipples, so I don't think it would be a huge concern.
No, I don't tweak my own nipples in the game. I tweak the AI nipples.
And to be very clear, he is talking about the London Heist game, which is it the demo disc?
No, I'm talking literally every game I play.
Yeah, but a lot of these games don't have like people.
Let's be clear. If there's nipples, he's tweaking them. He's trying to. Tactic, this is a family show. You took us down a dark road. I want to talk about, in the context of this, and in the context of you mentioning finger tracking before, what's the end of the design road here? Or is there not one? Like, what is the ideal VR controller? Because to me, it's a glove.
Right. I think we're in agreement here. My initial thought, like if they could somehow capture all of this technology in a glove that you wear, like that is the ideal VR setup. I don't know why we landed on wands in this generation. Like I guess there's got to be a reason that we landed on wands instead of just doing gloves, probably from like a wiring standpoint maybe. I don't know.
Well, the thing is, you still need buttons and triggers, right?
Yeah, but you could do that like on your palm, have buttons on the palm of the glove that you could hit or something.
You can't do that with triggers. And also, I feel like it would be hard to reliably press buttons on your palm. Maybe I'm wrong. I've never tried to do that. I've never just sat down and put buttons on my palm and tried to press them. But
I mean, I remember though, like I'm thinking back to the iToy days. I don't know if either of you had an iToy for the PlayStation 2, but essentially it was a camera. It was called the iToy, and you didn't use controllers at all. Like it somehow
just picked you up. It was like a Kinect.
Yeah, it basically was like a Kinect, where it just picked up your motion, took you out of the background without a green screen, and like put you in a game, and just picked up your hand motion. And so like I don't know why you couldn't just have like menu options kind of transparently in the corner. So if you wanted to switch weapons or something, you would make a motion, or if you wanted to get back to the menu, you could hover over a certain area in the screen, make gestures.
Yeah. I'm thinking about, in another point to make with regards to PSVR specifically, is I have the wands, but I also have the aim controller. And I think you guys have the aim controller as well, do you not?
Yeah, it's been very underutilized in our house, though.
It's been underutilized for me, but I have to say, I love it. I think you can't, the thing with like this glove idea, which I still think that's probably the end of the design road, and we'll let Techtic weigh in on that in a minute, but
that's not the end.
But I think the idea of holding something is very important. So I don't know if it amounts to you wear gloves and you still hold something that's like the aim. That doesn't really, the aim has a trigger, but it's not connected to anything. You know what I'm saying? The gloves can tell when you're pulling a trigger, but
well, it would be
the trigger
like,
itself is just a thing you have.
It would be like the peripherals for the Wii or the Switch, where like you have you have a tennis racket, but you're just holding it. It does absolutely nothing.
Right. I think that sort of thing could come if you had gloves that if you could buy a peripheral that was just basically a 9mm pistol that was just basically a piece of plastic that had maybe a movable trigger, and you use that with your gloves. To me, that's the end of the road, but Techtic apparently seems to feel differently. So Techtic, what to you is the end of the road, or is there not one?
I agree that gloves are the next logical step. I don't think it's the end of the road. The true thing that VR in general is missing is the legs. I mean, you either warp to your different location or you have to twist and then pan on the buttons. We need an omnidirectional treadmill. That's all
they definitely actually have them. I know it's always advertised to me on Amazon. I have no idea who makes the thing. I remember it was advertised on sale, and I was like, "This would be so neat." And I clicked on it, and it was absurdly expensive.
It's absurdly expensive.
It's more expensive than the VR headset.
It's not widely adapted across all games. It's just not there yet. And I agree. It's frustrating because the technology exists. It's just hasn't been implemented.
I totally agree with you. You raised a good point. Especially like playing Doom I'm sure I've talked about Doom VFR on the podcast before. It's a little maddening. because, like you said, you have this option of teleportation or quick panning that really disorients you very quickly. Farpoint did it way better, where you're just using a controller and you're walking around, and you're walking very slowly, you're not moving quickly, and you're always walking in one direction. So you're not having to do that quick jumping and everything. It's awful. So you have the option of a treadmill, but you also have the option of just going full Black Mirror with it, where it's not VR anymore, it's just happening in your head. That's the thing I can think, where somehow you can close your eyes and just lay down, and suddenly you're running around and walking around like you're in a video game.
No, I want to burn kilocalories.
Okay, so you want to be actually, up and moving.
Also, not a big chonky headset. That would be a cool upgrade too.
Well, I'm trying to think like Ready Player One. And I know this was obviously a fictional story, but like I'm trying to think of in the movie. I'm trying to remember what the setup was, because I believe it was something where they like locked into some kind of harness and they were able to move around. Yeah. But like it was kind of like you were almost in like a floating ring thing, and you were like tethered, almost like a bungee sort of deal, but you could like walk around. I feel like that is probably somewhere in the future. You know what I mean? Like
that's in the future, but that's like, I think, akin to laser tag today. Like if you went to play laser tag, they would fit you up with this little vest and stuff, and you go in and run around. Soon enough, they're going to say, okay, we're going to put all of you in these rigs. You're going to be wearing headsets, and you're going to be running around in this virtual environment. You're all going to be wired up to headsets. You can still talk to each other and everything, but you're going to be like in space or something. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be a thing you go do, like an escape room more, but I don't think it's going to be in people's houses, at least not for a while.
You got to move away from the big chonky headsets, because those things get sweaty and gross.
Well,
and
so
the biggest challenge there is the optics. If you've ever tried to look at say a small screen right up close to your eye, it's impossible. And that's why the headsets are so thick, because you got to have it far away from your eye, or else your eye just won't be able to focus on the image. And so how do we do that from a technology perspective? And that's the challenge for the next step.
I feel like it can't be that far off, though, because you do have things like we just talked about last week, the Microsoft, what was it, the Wave?
Mesh.
No, that's not right. Yeah, the Microsoft Mesh. That didn't look like it was this massive thing that
AR,
was super
though.
thick. And I understand that's AR, but it's still like you're seeing things through these glasses that aren't there in real life. Like it's not projecting a hologram in the middle of your room. You're seeing that through a lens. So if we can focus on something like that, I feel like we can do something with VR. We just aren't there yet.
Well, isn't the Quest, like PSVR is the biggest one, I think. Like the Quest is like pretty reasonable, I think. I've never worn it.
Yeah, it's not as big as the PSVR, at least not the new one. It's a little bit slimmer.
The thing about PSVR, and I was just reading at the tail end of this article on IGN about the controllers. I guess it was announced in February. This slipped by me, but what is the most annoying thing about using PSVR to you? Because for me, it's such a tangle. Anytime I want to use it, it's like, okay, there's 16 cords. The fact that the PSVR2 is purportedly going to only have one cord.
You have 16 cords?
There's 2 cords that plug into the processor, right? And then you have to daisy chain your HDMIs from the console to the processor, and then I believe
we leave that processor plugged in all the time.
Well, so do I, but my cord management situation with that is not good. It's partly a me problem, but also partly unless you have a large entertainment center, like I have a very difficult, then like they sell like racks you can put it on, but none of those look very good. I want something that, I mean, ideally it'd be wireless, obviously, but that's never going to happen. But I want the cord management system to be
I wouldn't say never, because I mean, obviously to take some of the power from the PlayStation 5, you need a wire. But I mean, you look at the Oculus Quest 2, and that is completely wireless. And yeah, you can add a wire to basically take some of the processing power load and divert it to your PC and make stuff run smoother and run better games. But I mean, wireless isn't out of the realm of possibility.
That's what I want, almost certainly. That's the number one thing. Forget the controllers, forget any other improvements. I want the wires gone, because I think that's good. I think that would be more freeing than even you realize. Regardless of getting tangled or not, I think just not having them could be a big deal. But we're gonna move on from PSVR for now. We have other topics to get to, but we want to know on Twitter at OWElite86, at OW Techtic, at OW Nerdbomber, and our main show account at Online Warriors 1. What do you think of the PSVR2 controllers? What do you think of the PSVR2 in general? What we've heard. This is just the latest thing. Let us know. Do you think the controllers look a little bulky like I do? Do you understand maybe things that I don't about why they look that way? Hit us up. drop us a DM or something. I don't know. I'm not active on the DMs and Twitter. Not sure if I've ever even sent a DM. Not my thing, but hit us up there. Let's move away from gaming for a second. We'll come back to gaming later. Let's talk about movies. Let's talk about Ace Ventura. And Nerdbomber's going to get mad because she doesn't like Jim Carrey. But Ace Ventura 3 officially in the pipe. And if you've never seen Ace Ventura, I've only seen the first one. Techtic is a...
Pet Detective is the best one, and if you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
Is Pet Detective... No, the second one's When Nature Calls. You did this last time. Pet Detective is the first one.
You're right. When Nature Calls is the best one, and if you haven't seen it, you need to see it.
I have not seen the second one. I've seen the first one.
They're both amazing.
They're both great. I've seen bits and pieces of the second.
Over there.
It's... Look, you know Jim Carrey. You've seen Bruce Almighty. Maybe you've seen Ace Ventura. Maybe you've seen Sonic. He is just an unchained melody of like insanely high energy comedy, right? And Ace Ventura, I don't know if he was involved in the writing process. I don't know if he took the script and made it something that it wasn't originally, but it lives and dies by his energy, right? So what was holding this up, for those that were curious, is that he doesn't do sequels. He's very reticent typically towards sequels, perhaps because of the way Ace Ventura 2 went, I don't know, but he didn't want to do 3 for a long time. He's just now coming around to it. I would imagine maybe because of money, though I don't know. The main question I have here is, does he still... The amount of energy you need to do something like Ace Ventura, is he over the hill? Like, I'm not an ageist, but...
Did you see Sonic?
I did not see Sonic.
I think he's got the energy for it.
He definitely...
So you think he's still there?
One of the things that I knocked... the only thing that I really didn't like about Sonic, and I loved the Sonic movie, was Jim Carrey's interpretation of Dr. Robotnik / Eggman. Because, I mean, a lot of people loved it, but Eggman / Dr. Robotnik wasn't just this big, crazy, super hyperactive goofball. Like, he was more evil villain. And Jim Carrey kind of gave us that, but he also gave us like classic Jim Carrey, crazy, frenetic energy. And I personally didn't jive with that. Like, I thought the movie overall was great, and like it didn't damage the movie at all, but I think it could have been better without that frenetic energy. But that's
frenetic is a great word, by the way.
It's a long way to say that he still has it.
Frenetic is the perfect word for him. I mean, I will say, like,
I read a thesaurus today.
I have to gush. I mean, Ace Ventura, I think I probably first saw that movie when I was 12 or 13 years old. I laughed then, and I laugh now. I laughed like pretty hard when I watch that movie now. It is still, just to me, it's just the sense of humor in it holds up so much. It is a ridiculous movie. It's a movie about a man who is a pet detective. That alone should tell you that it's just going to be nonsensical.
A little bit of Finkel, a little bit of Einhorn.
A little bit of Finkel, a little bit of Einhorn. I particularly love the part where they're investigating the murder in the apartment, and he goes out onto the patio and he's sliding the glass door back and forth. One of my favorite comedy scenes, and he's just like belting operatic, like it's so Jim Carrey. Like, again, I don't even know if there was a script. I don't know if they were just like, just do your thing, man. Like, I wonder that about this movie in particular. They just called him in and were like, just, you have to get from point A to point B narratively. However you get there, we do not care. It wouldn't surprise me at all to hear that, because to me, when I think of Jim Carrey,
if that were the case, I 100% think the rewind slow motion ballerina scene, that is off the script.
It has to be. That I don't even care if there was a script or not. That ballerina slow motion rewind has to be not in the script. There's no way they wrote that in there, because who's going to do that? Who's going to think to do that besides Jim Carrey? To me, this is his definitively iconic role. And I know that's going to take... I'm going to take flack for that. People would say The Mask, probably. Maybe people would say Bruce Almighty. I don't know. To me, this is
I think
his
it's
iconic.
I 100% think it's Ace Ventura.
You know, the casually, the alrighty then, that had to be a huge thing when this movie first came out. People were probably saying that all over the place, right?
I'm just curious what direction they're going to go.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean...
Well, I believe... So the article from Screen Rant that we all read prior to the show...
It's pretty speculative, but yeah.
But I believe the writers from the Sonic movie are attached to it, and they're speculating that that could be why Jim Carrey is suddenly open to doing this sequel.
Which would make sense to me, because if I was a writer and I worked with Jim Carrey on something else, and I saw, like you said, that he still has this energy, you have to channel that. Right. And you were complaining about Dr. Robotnik because maybe that's not a good place to channel Jim Carrey's energy. Well, at that point, you look at what places are like definitively good places to channel his energy. And Ace Ventura is one of those. And honestly, as a screenwriter, I think it would be great to be like, let's just make, like, there's no rules, when you're writing a movie like Ace Ventura. I feel like it's ridiculous. He can be chasing a dog across Mars. Like that would be a reasonable idea for Ace Ventura 3 at this point. It's just you have a really, I think, exciting creative space, and I guess he must have liked the Sonic writers. Maybe they gave him some good things to work with, and he thinks they'll give him more for Ace Ventura 3. But yeah, as far as narrative tactic, you're asking the right question, which I don't know. We have to look at other kind of reboots. It's not a reboot, but other sequels that have come 20 years later. I think it's going to
surround him being a dad, and I know that sounds crazy, but picture this opening scene. There's the Lion King-esque vibe of him holding up a baby. The circle of life, and it moves us all. And then instead of having the monkey as his sidekick, it's this baby similar to the Hangover type vibe with him in all these different shenanigans. I think that would sell tickets like wildfire.
How old is Jim Carrey right now?
Yeah, but is he age appropriate for that sort of thing?
Is he old enough to plausibly have a young baby? Because I think
so. If you know how male genetics were, not male genetics, the way men age, they don't have a menopause and can still be fertile.
A family show, folks.
I certainly understand that, but
either way, he's very much kind of this ageless persona, in my opinion, and no one really questioned someone like Zach Galifianakis carrying around a baby the whole movie.
Yeah, because Zach Galifianakis is, well, I suppose he found the baby. It depends on how Ace Ventura finds the baby, I guess. But what I was envisioning, I think the father thing is a very, very good guess at the very least. It probably is what they're doing. But I envision it more of, we've seen it done so many times. It's kind of this archetype at this point where, look at Indiana Jones, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, where they brought in Shia LaBeouf to, at the time, I think purportedly they were going to make him the next one. That's not happening anymore for obvious reasons. But then you look at Star Wars, they had Luke there trying to teach someone and, passing the torch. You even look at movies like Shaft, where I haven't even seen the original Shaft, but they just came out with the Shaft remake a couple of years ago or last year sometime. And it's that same sort of thing where you have this character who's, quote unquote, still got it, still doing the things he did in the last movie, but he's, in the interest of money, at the very least, it's Hollywood, it just churns on money. So if they're going to make an Ace Ventura 3, chances are they're thinking about, okay, how can we keep this franchise alive after Jim Carrey, he's not going to be able to do the crazy physical crap he does in his 80s. Or maybe he will, I don't know. But they might be looking for somebody else, and that's impossible, in my opinion. That's a dark road for this to go down. I think it is maybe the most logical one for them to go down in terms of just what Hollywood does and how it works. But finding a new Ace Ventura would be subpar relative to finding a way to somehow tie off his arc. If there is an arc throughout these two movies. I haven't seen the second one, but I would love them to bring Courtney Cox back. That would be interesting to me because people might not remember, but she was the love interest in the first one. And, granted, movies like Indiana Jones and Star Wars have done that too. At the end of the day,
instead of like a baby, he has a full-grown, like, Pete Davidson is his son,
right?
And he's trying to get him into the business, and he's like, "Dad, you suck. You're lame."
Yeah,
I could see that.
He finds out that he had a son, many years later. Maybe he had a son with Courtney Cox, and she never told him. That's again a very generic road, one we've seen before. But it would be. I think what you're describing is great. It would be interesting to see someone. I don't know what Ace Ventura's son would be called. Mace Ventura, no idea. But
different name altogether.
Imagine this. Imagine they take it in a totally different direction. They turn it on its head. His son is like a hard-boiled cop, like a noir kind of deal. No nonsense, takes things very seriously. And then it's funny for a different reason entirely, right? He's a person who hunts missing animals like they're missing people and, treats it like this very dark art. I think that could be funny. Suffice to say, this is not going to be coming out for a while. 2022, I think, will be at the very earliest. It's probably going to be later than that. There's no set release date yet that we know of. But people, again, Twitter, we're there. Ace Ventura, yes, no. Jim Carrey, yes, no.
Nope.
Ace Ventura 3.
That's not fair of me. I actually...
You haven't even given any of them a chance.
No, so...
Bruce Almighty is a good movie.
I've watched Bruce Almighty is good. I like Jim Carrey, and I've said the same thing about Will Ferrell. I like them in roles, aside from Elf, where it's a little less slapsticky. Same with Adam Sandler. A little less slapstick, a little more grounded in reality. Yeah. I don't mind even the humor, but take some of that crazy, I'm going to use the word again, frenetic energy and just dial it down. That's what I want.
the Jim Carrey you like, and we haven't mentioned probably the best Jim Carrey movie. I'm realizing now.
Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
That's a good one too, actually. But I was thinking The Truman Show, which I think is similar to what you're saying, where it's not even funny. Like, it probably is at certain parts, but it's not designed to be funny. Eternal Sunshine is not designed to be funny. It's just designed to let him be an actor, which he does do on occasion.
And they do it well. And I think that's the thing that gets me. Because, like, there are slapstick, stupid comedies that I absolutely love. Like, the Harold and Kumar movies are so stupid, and I love them.
Pineapple Express, A+.
But for whatever reason, the frenetic physical acting and like the crazy facial expressions and like just screaming and yelling, I feel like I know these actors can do better than this. And it makes me angry because I'm like, you're just using this as a crutch. I know you have a more well-rounded acting resume. You can do better than this. Why are you doing this again? And it was what I felt with Hubie Halloween with Adam Sandler even. And we talked about that a few months ago when that movie came out. And it was just like, Adam Sandler, I know you could have made this like a heartfelt, funny Halloween movie. Like thinking back to like 50 First Dates, if you would have taken on like that persona. And instead he went into more of that like slapsticky stuff. And that just drives me crazy.
Oh, the voice he did. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it's just not my type of humor. It just isn't.
Did you ever see Yes Man?
Yes Man was actually pretty decent.
That one's pretty good too. Yeah. He's made a good chunk of like really good movies. I'm a Jim Carrey fan, I will say. But yeah, let us know on Twitter what you're feeling about this. If you think Ace Ventura 3 should happen, if you think it should stay dead, which is a valid opinion in the era of remakes, you might just say, hey, let this one die. Let us know. And we're going to take our break now and come back to talk more about video games a little bit. But before we do, Stephen Keller, Ben Checkness, take a bow. Our Patreon producers getting their weekly shout out because they are night level subscribers on our Patreon. Ben and Stephen, both, we thank you so much for helping us make this show, for supporting the show, for getting it from our mouths, I guess, into your ears. That's a kind of a circuitous process. So we thank you. And as I mentioned, they support us at the night level on Patreon, which as a result, they get this producer's shout out. They get access to our monthly secret segment and vlog, of course. And they also get input into our weekly game segment, which we'll do later. I believe Nerdbomber is hosting this week. So we'll get to that. You can also support us at the Squire level, which is one tier lower on our support tree. And that gets you access to the monthly secret segment and vlog. And there's also a page level, which gives you access to the monthly secret segment. So for more of the details on all of those tiers, everything they have to offer, you can head over to patreon.com/onlinewarriorspodcast. Thanks again to Ben and Steven. And we will take a short break now, shout out a sponsor, before we come back and talk about Project Athia and Necromunda.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast. It provides podcasters with a flat rate for ad space, so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. Apply today to become a member like we are and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And be sure to add our podcast, the Online Warriors Podcast, in the How Did You Hear About Podgo section of the application. Thank you again to Podgo for sponsoring today's episode.
Okay, so Square Enix, Project... I thought it was Project Athia until an hour ago when I watched the Project Athia teaser trailer that revealed the actual title for this game. Now, have we talked about Project Athia on the show before?
I think we touched on it briefly because it was in one of the showcases that one of the consoles put together. I want to say it was the PlayStation showcase, right? It had to have been because it's an exclusive.
Well, it had to have been a very vague trailer because what this teaser gave us, which was lodged, it was kind of the crown jewel, arguably the crown jewel of the Square Enix demonstration last week. It was basically revealing the main cast member, the protagonist for this game, and doing an interview with that actress. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. But they showed then some footage from the game, and I still don't know what it's... I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's about. The game, by the way, the title of the game, Forspoken, there's a dragon. I can tell you that. There's a dragon, and there's a vague... Is this post-apocalyptic? Am I on the right track here? That's the vibe I was getting, but maybe I'm wrong.
That is definitely I definitely got like a supernatural, fantastical sort of far future type vibe, because there's in the short snippet of gameplay they showed, there is like magic. The main character is using magic to fight bad things and a dragon. And so she also runs super, super fast, and I think uses magic to propel her forward.
I love the movement in this game.
Yeah, there's a lot to the little like swirly thing she does through the air. A+. I watched that. I was like, I want to do that, which is what you want to showcase when you're showing off your game for the first time, right? I was getting like, and I haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn, but I was getting like Horizon Zero Dawn vibes, a little bit of Control vibes, obviously less dark than Control. But then there's a dragon. You have this seemingly very large world to roam around in. So,
and there were so many triangles.
So many triangles. I think I actually really like the fact that I don't know what it is yet. They showed us a very, very small snippet and showed you what you would be doing in as compact a way as possible without showing you everything, without laying bare any sort of questions that you have. And it keeps me on the hook. So
yeah, I 100% agree. Because right now, I don't think they want to show us too much, because they said this is still like very early production, and we have a way before this game actually comes out, because I think
2022 at least.
I think. So I think this is a good little teaser thing to get you on the hook. I think seeing the dragon for me got me super excited, and it kind of almost had like Tomb Raider-ish vibes. And I mean, I think Square Enix did a really great job with the Tomb Raider reboot franchise. So this kind of meshed like a Tomb Raider kind of aesthetic and feel, and like the design of the character and everything looked like it was very modern day design, but then introduced fantastical elements like a dragon. And so I'm hooked. I don't know enough about the game, but I can't wait to see more about the game. And so for me, I think this is a very successful trailer, just because it basically gave you a little like love kernel, and I'm stealing that from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, a little love kernel. So you're like, look, this could be very cool. Wait until the next kernel. And
I've never heard that expression.
You should watch Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Duly noted. I agree. And I like the Tomb Raider parallel too, especially because Square Enix made that game. I was a big fan of, I don't remember if I played Rise of the Tomb Raider or just the original remake of it, but I was a big fan of whichever one. I was actually when I still had an Xbox One. I played that on the Xbox One, and I was a big fan of that. So we can certainly only hope they do something as well as that. And this has a lot of potential. I think that's what they wanted to tell us, right? Is that they want to show us this has a lot of potential, and maybe it's for you. And I think it's also smart to put the actress front and center, who is clearly invested in the project and who can speak well of it. Again, without giving away too many details. She basically just said who she's playing, what to a very small extent what motivates her character, and we took it from there. So I was big into that. Techtic, any thoughts before we move to Necromunda? Because I know you want to talk about Necromunda.
Well, like you said, the coolest thing in my opinion was the movement. I love games that have very fluid movement, almost a mesmerizing movement, similar to, I hate to always circle back to this game, but Spider-Man. Any kind of super swift, spinny, fun acrobatics, it just gets me hooked. And I don't know what it is, but I love it. So I'm very excited about this game.
Yeah, Spider-Man's the gold standard in terms of movement. I totally agree, but that's just a side comment.
Before we totally turn away from the Square Enix Presents, the two other comments, there was a bunch of stuff that they showed. They like previewed Avengers' new path for 2021, which is probably great for people who play that game, and I don't. I heard bad things. I have the game.
Yeah, I was going to say,
it looked cool.
I thought that Avengers was dead or dying. So I was surprised, not that they threw a lot of weight behind it, but I was surprised to even hear about it, because I thought that did not do well.
It didn't, and there was a lot of like development things. Like I know people have been waiting on, like I know the Hawkeye DLC. Well, it's not DLC because it's just part of the next load of missions.
Give it to you.
Yeah. I think that came out shortly after this Presents, and it's been on hold or delayed for several months, and they weren't really communicating things well. So besides that, they also showed a lot of mobile games, which we all know I'm not a mobile gamer, so I don't really care. But they did premiere a new Life is Strange that they announced, and it looked pretty interesting. I don't know if you've played Life is Strange.
I haven't, but the remaster caught my eye because I think it's something I would like.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those, I hesitate to call it a walking simulator, but it kind of is. It's a very story-driven game. You're not like shooting or doing like adventure RPG elements. But they did announce a new one. And the one thing that I did want to note about it that I really like is that they actually moved away from the episodic content thing. Like they still chunked it up into chapters, but they're going to release the game all at the same time, which as someone who is a big fan of like the Telltale games and Life is Strange and all of those, I don't like waiting. Just give it to me all at once. The whole like episodic release, I hate it. So I'm really glad they didn't do that because that sucked.
So the two that they're remastering they're two games, but each game is split into a bunch of different episodes. So you're saying? Right.
So when they first launched Life is Strange and Life is Strange 2 and Life is Strange Before the Storm, they all released, it wasn't like a monthly basis. I don't remember what the time periods were, but they would release episode 1 and you would play through it. And then you'd have to wait for episode 2 to release. Kind of like what they did with Hitman and like all of the Telltale games did. And I'm not a fan of that. If I'm like playing a game, I will forget about it. Like I won't remember the controls. I won't remember the story. I don't want to wait a month or 2 months to get the next episode.
Right. Reasonable. Because, yeah, that one, pending the price point, that definitely caught my eye. Especially, I'm playing The Witness now, and granted, The Witness is certainly not a walking simulator. It's more of a puzzle-y game, but it's very calm. It's very serene. I think Life is Strange would deliver a similar experience. So that caught my eye as well.
And then my last comment, and this is so stupid, and it was like a 30 to 40-second trailer, and I'm not a big mobile gamer, but gosh darn it, if they didn't get me kind of excited for the Space Invaders mobile game. Why I'm excited for this, I don't know. But the trailer basically shows, like, in real life, Space Invader icons hidden, like, in graffiti on buildings and billboards and stuff like that. And in, like, random, like, labels on products and stuff like that. And people engaging with these logos somehow with their...
AR?
Yeah, it's an AR game. And that, I feel like that could be kind of neat. It could be like the next Pokemon Go. I don't know. That was a fun phenomenon. I could go for that again.
When I see mobile game, I just scroll. So
you didn't get on board with Pokemon Go, did you?
No, I'm not on board with Pokemon. So why would I get on board with Pokemon Go?
Because it was a cultural zeitgeist.
Yeah, one that I wasn't a part of the first time. Why would I want to be?
I might still play it. The main thing I struggle with is, do I evolve my Charmander?
Never.
Yeah, of course, always.
Never.
I don't know.
I've got more candies than I know what to do with, and I just don't want to evolve them.
Let's talk about Necromunda. Which is a standalone
roll
thing.
Roll the R. Necromunda.
I refuse to roll the R. You don't know that the R is rolled. In fact, I think it's likely that the R is not rolled because it's not a double R.
It's rolled.
This is not a Square Enix thing, Square Enix thing. This is a separate entity outside of that demonstration. This is in the Warhammer universe, which, boy, do I not know anything about
releasing games in the Warhammer universe. Yeah. I don't know anything about them.
We're going to have to learn, is what it seems like, because we still don't know. But this was a very, it sounded like all three of us watched this trailer and we're just like, okay, it's Doom. I mean, it's. I don't want to say it's just Doom. It's not a Doom reskin, but it's clearly inspired by Doom.
It's a Doom Cyberpunk Mad Max reskin.
Yeah, very cyberpunky, which I liked. I like the chain. I like Doom. I actually haven't finished Doom still, the original. It's fun. I like it, but I just haven't. The story hasn't hooked me. First of all, because there's not really much of a story, and second of all, the story is like demons, which I'm like, I don't want demons. I want something different than that.
Well, the original Doom wasn't supposed to have a story. If you want story, you should play Doom Eternal.
I don't want to skip. That seems unfair.
Okay, fair point.
But I imagine Warhammer, something Warhammer inspired, something like Necromunda will have more of a story than that. But my God, the blood. So much blood. Don't put the kids to bed before you watch this one. Trailer, I mean. And probably also before you play the game, put them to bed. I mean, I'm into it. I like, at least once in a while, I like kind of flashy action games like this. Not going to say no to it. Tactic, I don't know if the water's edge for you in terms of your interest in this is just being able to roll the R, but it feels that way a little bit right now.
I mean, I like to work up a sweat sometimes when I play games, and this seems like it'll scratch that itch. It's got high intensity, it's got a lot of shooting, it's got bad guys that I can simply mow down, which in its own right is kind of satisfying. So I can very much see the pleasure in playing this game.
I'm going to blow up your spot. When I tried to get you to play Doom, you're like, this is too intense for me. It's making me sweaty. I can't do this.
But I played a little bit, and I just realized I don't want to get embarrassed right now, and I'm wearing a nice shirt.
Is there a blow up your spot sound effect on the board that you can play?
Well, no. My spot being blown up was that I was wearing a shirt that I didn't want to saturate. I am just a very sweaty Italian
just a very sweaty person. You should try Doom VFR then. Make it even sweatier.
What I was really excited about this game as someone who played Doom and Doom Eternal and loved them both, I thought Doom Eternal was a little long in the tooth, but both of them were super fun and really fluid games.
You're long in the tooth.
I don't know if that's the right use of long in the tooth, but I appreciate the turn of phrase. Yeah. Do you know what long in the tooth means?
Stupid.
Not to go all dad on you. It means old.
Yeah. Well, no,
When you're
long.
No, long in the tooth just means old.
Getting him all hot and bothered again.
Well,
That's for a secret segment. That's a good tease for a secret segment. We'll talk about what hot and bothered means to me if we haven't on the main episode yet, because it means something different than what you're currently thinking. I can guarantee you that. Anyways, go on.
The price point of this game. So both Doom and Doom Eternal, granted, I played Doom Eternal free from Game Pass, but both of them released as $60 games. And Necromunda, I can't roll my R, sorry.
Necromunda.
Thank you. Is releasing at $39.99, and I think you can pre-order it for even cheaper than that. And that's a great price point. Like,
yeah.
I don't know, maybe it won't be a super long game, but
I'll sweat for $39.99.
yeah, like that's a sweet price point right there. So
I'm feeling this. Yeah,
I'm feeling that.
Because I recently, I had a great experience with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2. That was a $40 game. I like this. I feel like I'm seeing it more and more. There are games that are like, that have the feel of AAA titles that are like, $40 is fine. And I'm like,
do you know what?
It's great.
We talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's like the return of the AA game. Like they have that polish, but they have the lower price point, and I love it. I'm here for it.
I certainly think Tony Hawk would still be considered AAA. I just think they're just nice people. But like, I am beyond infuriated still. Like I think it was last week sometime. My girlfriend was like, "Man, you know what I would love is to play Mario Kart on the Switch." And I was like, "Oh, we should just buy that. We should just have it." It's still $60, I think. Like,
dude, you must have just missed the Mario Day sale. It wasn't included in the Mario Day sale.
Really? Yeah.
Oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah, they really just don't like, and Switch is kind of a special case, I think, where there's just certain games that they're just never going to go on sale. And if they do go on sale, it's like, oh, we'll take $10 off. It's like, okay.
You know what's a fun, cheaper alternative that you guys should look into? Either Team Sonic Racing or the Crash Bandicoot Team Racing. Both of those super great and not $60.
Duly noted, because
I'm a big kart racing girl. I've played them all. I love them all. It's a guilty pleasure.
And Mario Kart's great, but I just don't. It's just not worth that to me. At least currently, it's not. So that's good to know. So we got Project Athia, also known as Forspoken. We have Necromunda, or however you pronounce it, and a bunch of other smatterings of games that we just mentioned. But we have to talk about what we've been playing, what we've been doing, what we have been up to. And I'm going to lead this week because I'm just going to go full blown PSA. Just a great show for pandemic times. As we try to wean our way out of pandemic times, this is going to get you there. This is beyond relaxing. I think I've talked on this show before about my love for the Great British Baking Show. Guys, the Great Pottery Throwdown. Have either of you heard of this show?
No, I haven't.
This is on HBO Max, and imagine the Great British Baking Show, but instead of baking things, they are making pottery.
What do you call a potter?
I think you would call it a potter. I actually don't know, but they throw on a wheel. And they the Unchained
the old
Melody
Patrick
theme from
Swayze.
Ghost. Yeah, they don't do it in pairs like that, but
please tell me they make at least like one reference to Ghost.
I'm sure they have. They make actually a lot of penis references because there are certain things that you have to do in potting. Where, like, for example, adding a handle to a mug, you have to pull the handle, and it looks like you're stimulating a penis.
I'd probably be pretty good at potting.
Family show here at Online Warrior.
No, I'm just thinking that I think I'd be good at it. I have an attention to detail.
I'm just saying we keep bringing up penis stuff, and this one's on.
You brought it up. I was talking about I think I'd be good at potting. I mean, make whatever connections you want to make.
Watching this show, I want to try like throwing clay so bad. I'm sure I'd be terrible at it. I'm sure it's like when I do an art or a craft.
I've seen it, and it looks absolutely relaxing.
It looks so relaxing. It looks like the kind of thing that if you can become one with the idea of being dirty, because it's like the dirtiest thing in the world. There's like water and clay flying everywhere. It's gonna get everywhere.
I'm out with that. Like, I think I would be fine with the prospect of getting on my clothes, but the idea of getting clay everywhere under my fingernails would gross me. Like, that's the thing. Like, even if I'm working in the garden, I need to wear gloves, man, because getting stuff under my fingernails is like the one thing that just grosses me out.
That's the place where it goes the most in this show, at least as far as I can tell. But it's Yeah, I want to try it, but I'm the kind of person who, when I approach an art or a craft for the first time, it has to be perfect, or
I'm sure you can
hate
find
myself.
You know how they have those
lose interest.
wine and paint classes? I'm sure you can find a wine and pottery class.
I would think so, right? I mean,
Actually,
clay's going to get in the wine, so you can't have wine, but just
You can get a little sippy cup.
That's not a bad idea. Just do it intravenous. Just inject it right into me.
all sorts of these pop-up companies, feel free to take this idea. But now that things are becoming legal around the country, pot and pottery.
Pot and pottery. That's not a bad idea at all.
You would just call it pottery, but you would make the pot, like the POT part, in green in your logo.
But this show, like, I think between this show and the Great British Baking Show and probably other things, I'm like being like conditioned in like a Splinter Cell kind of way that when I hear British voices, I just immediately like stress rolls off of me, which is great. But they make, like, the last episode we watched an episode just before we started recording here. They made toilets. And it was fascinating because, of course, they're not just making a plain white toilet. They can decorate it and turn it into whatever form they want and make sure it still functions as a toilet. And it's as a, like, I have respect for craftsmen. If you have respect for craftsmen and craftswomen, watch this show.
They can't all be spun. You can't all spin a toilet.
The toilets were hand built. They do a mixture of hand building and spinning, which they actually call it throwing clay there to get the terminology correct. They do a bunch of stuff. They do, like, one spot challenge that they had was they had to make a bouquet of roses out of clay. How would you do that? Well, they did it, and it's mesmerizing to watch. Hard recommend. That's my update for the week. I also finished a Stephen King book, but I don't even want to talk about that. I just want to talk about Great Pottery Throwdown because it's been amazing. We've gone through 2 seasons, and there's only 1 left, and I'm sad about it. But HBO Max, check it out. Nerdbomber. Over to you.
So, 2 things, and I feel like Techtic and I might combine, so I'll quickly get into the book that I'm reading. I am reading To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, which is the latest book by the person who wrote the Eragon series, Christopher Paolini.
I didn't know he was still kicking. I mean, he's very young, but I thought he got out of writing.
This is his first quote-unquote adult science fiction / fantasy style book. And I will say, I guess it's taken him like a decade to write this book. It is an 800-pound behemoth of a novel.
No.
It's massive. Like, this easily could have been split into 2 books, and it's taken me a while to read. The unfortunate part, so this was a birthday gift from my parents. I had wanted this book for a while. I loved Eragon. I was like super into those books as a kid.
Yeah.
And I've heard after I grew up, because like that kind of with Redwall, like books like that really sparked my interest in science fiction and fantasy and that kind of stuff. So I've read a lot of those type of books. And especially like as I grew up, I started reading more adult instead of like young adult. And I've heard that if you go back and you read Eragon now as an adult who's read like seasoned fantasy, the writing is a little just meh. And you can kind of feel that in To Sleep in a Sea of Stars.
Nah.
And it's a little sad and a little disappointing. And you can tell he hits his stride as the book goes on. But I will say for the first probably like 200 pages or so of the book,
oh God,
I was like, well, I mean, it's like an 800-page book. So I was like, I need to give this thing a fair shake. I need to at least get halfway through. And the first 200 pages were slow. And it took me the longest to read those 200 pages because there's a lot of just like, I won't even call it
dry exposition.
Yeah, it's kind of dry exposition. He also does that thing where, and I hate this when authors do this, like things that are specific to the world that he built, there's a glossary in the end and he just throws words and terms around and expects you to look them up in the back or to understand them from context, and you don't.
Yeah, the Inheritance trilogy had glossaries. I think he was a little better about that because he knew he was marketing it to kids, but
and it was,
he would do that.
It was more like there were different races and stuff. And whereas this is like the human race exploring space. And so between a lot of that terminology and then what I felt was kind of uninspired alien design, like he decides that the alien race that they meet very early on in the book, he's going to call them jellies because they look like jellyfish. And I was just like, that's very uninspired. And like when they finally converse with the aliens, there's another name, but ultimately like everyone just calls them jellies, and that bothers me.
This is upsetting because you had me really interested. I didn't even know he had come out with a new book, and I would have.
So hang tight. the first 200 pages, kind of rough. But then
I can't hang tight for 200 pages. Like, I'm telling you right now, I can't do that. But
well,
go on.
Pages 200 to 800 are actually like, once you get into it and you've got the terminology down and you're like invested in the world, it moves pretty fast. You start to care about the characters a little bit more. The story is actually good. I feel like if you would have just maybe skipped somehow or like condensed it down, because like the first 200 pages, I was like, I'm going to give this like a 2-star in my Goodreads. And now I'm like, this is probably like a 4-star book at the end of this.
Yeah, I was about to Google what kind of reviews this has gotten because
it's gotten really good reviews too. That's the thing that's like, so I don't know if it's just me being like nitpicky because I expected Eragon level of wonder and I didn't get it right away. And then I had to wait 200 pages to get there. But like, I wouldn't say it's a bad book because I'm really enjoying it now. And pages 200 to 800 have really flown by. And I think it took me a month to read the first 200 pages and now maybe like a week and a half to read the rest of the book, if that tells you anything.
It does.
So if you can make it through the first 200 pages, there is a really good book here. I feel like maybe his editor just did him dirty.
It's possible, I suppose. I'll look into it. My internet browser froze, so I can't look up the
I will say it's gotten
reviews.
So like most of the major publication outlets have given it really good reviews. If you look on like Goodreads,
3.8 on Goodreads.
You either have like really good reviews, and the reason why it's like a 3.8 is you have a slew of like 4s and 5s, people saying this is great. Then you have a slew of like 1s where it's like this is garbage, but they probably didn't read past page 200. So
right, that would be me potentially. Good to know. Good, good info.
So like I said, like I like the story. I was a little disappointed in the beginning and how the world building was set up, but I liked the story. And overall, I think I landed in the upper echelon of the ratings with this book, but it just took me a while to get there. It's no Eragon, though.
Yeah, I should lower my expectations, I think. Okay, and you said Techtic and you are going to combine forces?
Justice League, the Snyder Cut.
Right, I forgot about this. Go on.
I am going to say this. I thought it was good. The problem with Justice League initially was that it didn't take the time to develop the characters. And when you have 4 hours, you've got time to do that, for sure. And so I thought with regards to character development, I thought it was done really, really well. I thought it was nice to see that Steppenwolf had a purpose more than just, I bad guy. It was, to redeem himself, to find a place under Darkseid. Great. And it gave him more of a personality. You almost kind of felt for him to some sense, which was nice. Now, that said, there's obviously some things that I didn't really care for. And again, it's the long duration. Some of the Superman-related battles just seemed too easy.
Yeah. That's how the original cut was.
Yeah, and I still don't like that. It's just
can't really fix it. Superman's a broken character.
You can't.
I'll die on this hill.
You can't take down an entire Amazonian squad, and then Superman's like, "Nah, use a pansy." Done. You put up a little bit more of a fight. Come on.
Right.
But I guess that kind of sets it up for a sequel with Darkseid. So I can kind of see.
I've been told there is not going to be a sequel.
Yeah, so I think this movie, even though it sets up a sequel, they said that this is not canon. Nothing will come of this.
And that's the worst part.
Just for us.
And why do it?
The worst part. So they set up
it made it better though.
Not 2, but 3 possible sequels. You had Darkseid wanting to get the anti-life equation. They set up.
By the way, spoilers to all this.
Oh yeah, they set up Martian Manhunter joining the squad, and they set up a apocalyptic wasteland where
the Joker is,
and they reference the Red Hood in it. And I'm just like, how can nothing come from any of this? You guys are bastards.
Who is the studio or Zack Snyder for even trying? Because I
Why
think there's
set all of that up if it's not canon? Nothing's going to come of it.
Well, I think people requested it, and so he delivered. Yeah. I
don't know. Zack Snyder knew that whole movie was never going to get made. I think it's a little bit on him.
So one of the things that I will say is that I believe they said that ultimately Zack Snyder had gotten this entire giant, massive movie down to like 3.25 or 3.5 hours, and they didn't want to go any shorter than that. So he was like, screw it, I'm out. And that's what caused him to leave. And I will say this was better. And I think if you could convince people, which would be a hard sell, and I kind of understand why they didn't want to give that long of a movie runtime in theaters, is because all of the movies, the DC movies leading up to Justice League, were not well received. So how are you going to convince people they want to spend 3.5 hours in a theater? Now,
what you do is you make it into 2.
Right.
That's
and I
what they should
think
have done.
that's exactly what they should have done, because the first half of the movie is setting up the backstories for all of these characters who are recruited into the Justice League, who are just introduced in this movie. And Joss Whedon really cut a lot of that, and it really cut down the stakes for why this team is together. And I will say Cyborg is not my favorite character in any adaptation, whether it's Doom Patrol or Justice League. I think he's kind of whiny. I understand why he's whiny, but I just think he's kind of whiny.
It's amazing in Teen Titans.
Right. But like, I don't know. I don't like the woe is me type thing, I guess, that he portrays. But Cyborg's backstory is really fleshed out and explained in the Snyder Cut, and it's pivotal to why the team and why the story is even existing. Like, the entire Mother Box thing really hinges on Cyborg's origin story, and by cutting pretty much all of that, none of the characters really seem like there's a reason for them to get together in the first place.
Right, which he was like made from a Mother Box, right? That's like the thing.
Yeah. So you
they
get
didn't
rid
mention
of
that in the
and-
original cut at all, by the way.
Yeah, there's so many things, and even like the Flash, the way the Flash is introduced in the original Justice League versus the Snyder Cut, I feel like the Flash's story was better. The Flash seemed a little bit more competent in this story. He wasn't just like...
That's interesting, because I thought he was the best part of the original.
I think he was also one of the better parts in the Snyder Cut, but I think they did his story a little bit more justice, no pun intended, in the Snyder Cut. And I think really ultimately what this all boils down to, in my opinion, and Techtic, I don't know if you feel the same way, but if you would have just given these characters their own origin stories and followed the MCU formula where you don't try to make a team movie with a bunch of characters nobody is introduced to yet, and you give them an introduction, that would have been so much better. And then the Justice League, getting them together, people would already have connections to these characters, and it would have made sense. Or just even splitting the movie in 2. But we didn't get that. We instead got it in the form of this 4-hour movie, which proved to be a better experience. When you care about the Justice League characters as individuals a little bit more, it makes the team up more appealing and compelling.
Another thing I will say I'm glad that they didn't do is there's one scene where Superman, is resurrected and he doesn't really remember anything, and he's coming off as very aggressive and he's attacking everyone. I'm really glad Bruce didn't go up to him and go, "Hey, remember Martha?"
Right.
Because that was terrible.
I mean, yeah, I the metaphor I used before, I think I might have even used before on the show. I'll say it again. DC tried to eat the cake before they baked it.
Exactly.
And that was very clear in the original cut. It might have been less clear in the Snyder Cut, but I think the Snyder Cut still had to have had the same problems. And at the very least, if it tried to fix those problems, that's why it was 4 hours long.
And I will say the epilogue, I know a lot of people loved the interaction between the Joker and Batman, but that was like 30 minutes of a 4-hour movie you could have gotten rid of. I did not need it. Like, I know people enjoyed it, but like, this is, as you said before, this is setting up sequels that are never going to happen. And now I'm sitting through, like, it could have been a 3.5-hour experience instead of this 4-hour thing that by the end I was just like, why am I watching this?
Even the dialogue was just dragged out. Each time he stopped talking to laugh was like a minute of a door creaking.
Well, it was like there was a lot of B-roll where he would say something and it would just like pan on Joker's face for a little bit. And you're like, what the fuck?
And then Batman would just go, "Fuck you." He did. He cussed.
So I thought there were still a lot of things that could have been done better. It was 1,000 times better than the original. There were things that could have been done better. There were things that confused me, like why introduce the Martian Manhunter at all? If you watch the Snyder Cut, you will understand what I'm saying, because there's 2 places where he shows up and it's super tangential and you're just like, why?
Yeah, I saw the first place and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
I don't.
And it's just
I won't
like,
spoil where it is, but it's.
so there's things that still could have been done better. I think this version of the movie was way better. I understand though why they didn't want to sell people on a 3.5-hour movie experience.
Just remember, Lois is the key.
So Tactic, last thought, star rating before we move on to the quiz.
Out of what?
4.
That's kind of an unfair. I'm going to use half points. I'm going to give it a 2.5.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, I would say very solid 2.5.
Duly noted. Right on. Okay. Justice League 4-hour cut. Check it out on HBO Max also. Nerdbomber, you have a quiz for us today. Is that correct?
I do. And so this quiz is all about Harry Houdini. Our Patreon
The Hood Master.
subscribers voted on this because it is Houdini's birthday on the date that this episode releases. So happy birthday, Harry Houdini.
H-Dog. Big ups.
Lots of fun, interesting things. I tried to find things that weren't necessarily about magic. Because
I love
felt
magic,
like
guys. Good choice. Good choice, Patreon people.
you're basically Phil Dunphy, right?
If I could go to the Magic Castle, I would. Let me put it that way. And if you don't know what the Magic Castle is, I'm not talking about Disney World. Just Google it. All right.
I'm Phil Dunphy.
Phil Dunphy off. So I'll start this off. Tactic, you'll go first, and then we'll do kind of round robin. Again, this is a Price is Right style trivia. We'll start this off because it's Houdini's birthday. Can you tell me the year that Harry Houdini was born?
1950.
Way too late. I mean, geez, dude, respect yourself. 1850.
All right, Illeagle gets this point. He was born in 1874.
Yeah, I was after I said it, I was like, I was off by 100 years.
Yeah. He'd still be alive. Well, I guess we'll get to his death probably, but if it was 1950, there's a good chance he'd still be alive. Okay, good. I'm on the board.
Next up, obviously we know Harry Houdini was a master magician. I almost said musician, but no, he was a master magician. Very great with chains and everything like that. He was so good that he was elected to be the president of the Society of American Magicians. What year was he elected as president of SAM?
He was, well, look, we can extrapolate this from his birthday. When did his career peak? And also, when did he die? Because I actually don't know when he died. This was 1905. He was 31.
I think he was a younger success. I'm going to say he was 20, so I'm going to say 1890.
If anything, you're probably right. I would err on the younger side than what I said.
He was actually a little bit older, so Illeagle gets this one. He was elected president in 1917.
He had to be heading towards death by that point, but I don't know. Nerdbomber, do you have any questions about how he died? Because I want to say how he died so bad.
But
you can say.
I don't know.
Do you guys know how he died?
I have no idea. Oh, wait, no, I do know. He was punched in the stomach.
He got punched in the stomach.
His appendix ruptured or something like that.
There are people that think he was like assassinated in like a very particular way, where like someone managed to like burst his appendix by punching him the right way or something. It's fascinating. There's like whole YouTube videos about it. But anyways, go on.
So now I kind of like went into other things, non-magic things that Harry Houdini was involved in. And one of the things I was surprised to find out was he was actually an avid aviator. And even though there's some dispute over this claim, he is usually recognized as the first person to ever make a controlled flight in a powered plane on Australian soil. When did that flight take place?
Who's up first? Is this Tactic again? Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to say 1907.
That's a strong guess. Wright brothers, I think, were 04 or 05. Can't have been long after that. I'm going to give you a sporting chance. I'm not going to +1 you because that doesn't seem right, especially when I'm up by 2. So I'm going to say 1912, same year as the Titanic.
So Techtic gets this one because Illeagle busted by 2 years, even though he was closer.
Okay, yeah.
The flight took place on March 18th, 1910 in Diggers Rest, which is near Melbourne.
Tactic, don't say I never did anything for you.
Okay.
Now, the score here, Illeagle has 2, Techtic has 1. I have 2 questions and a tiebreaker left, so this is still anybody's game. And the next one is actually about something that really peeved Harry Houdini. So while he made his fortune tricking people with his
he hated
Masters of
mentalists.
Illusions, he hated spiritualists and people who claimed they could put people in contact with their dead loved ones or read people's fortunes. And he actually offered people a reward to someone who could prove that they held powers. How much was that reward?
It's funny because I knew this because, again, I've watched YouTube videos about Harry Houdini. He's a very interesting man. And he hated these people. Like, hated them.
With a passion.
It's going to sound like not that big of a number, but it was a huge number back then. $10,000.
That's a solid guess. I'm going to guess 8,000. I feel like you're right there.
Illeagle did have this right on the money. No pun. Oh, yeah, pun intended, honestly. I'm just going to lean into it. Pun intended. He offered a reward of $10,000 to anyone who could prove they held powers.
Which back then, oh my God.
That was a lot of money.
That was so much money.
And he debunked a lot of spiritualists and frauds, basically ruined their quote-unquote careers. He even testified before Congress to try to get those people outlawed and have spiritualists outlawed in the United States. So he really hated that.
I agree. All these Long Island mediums.
Like after he died, like there was a whole thing too, because people, I'm trying to remember if it was that his wife did contact him or try to, or she wouldn't even try because she knew that he wouldn't want to be or something. It was a whole, and it was wrapped up in this whole hatred he had for spiritualism. It was very interesting. I implore anyone who's listening to go watch videos about Harry Houdini. Dude was absolutely fascinating. I clearly am an expert. I mean, let's finish this out. But
you are definitely going to win this. You're winning 3-1. But I have one last question. I thought it was pretty interesting about Houdini. So we're just going to play this out and see where the chips fall. So he actually was also a film producer, actor, and a stuntman. And he created his own film studio called the Houdini Pictures Corporation. And they made films like The Grim Game, The Master of Mystery, and Terror Island, where he actually performed his own stunts, which was actually pretty dangerous at the time. In what year did he create that film studio?
Well, you gotta think about what movies were like back then. Can't have been earlier than the 20s. I'm gonna say this was height of Depression times. This was 19. I think he made it 1927, right before the market went belly up.
I'm going to go with right after he flew in Australia, he did that. So I'm going to go 1908.
So Techtic gets this. It was actually in 1919 he created the film studio. Wow. It was only running and in operation for several years before he lost a ton of money and had to close it down.
He was ahead of the game. 1919, that's early for movie crap. Good for you, Harry.
So Illeagle magically wins this week's trivia and will be our host next week.
It is magical. I mean, I've been on a losing streak for a while now. It feels good to be off the schneid, so to speak. I moved to 4-2 on the year. Nerdbomber 4-1, Techtic 2-3. I'll be continuing to keep you all updated on the scores throughout the year. But we have reached the close here. So we want to thank you all for listening. Head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, hit us up on Twitter. I already mentioned the handles. And keep on listening. Tell your friends. Tell your pets. Tell your houseplants. Put earbuds into flowers and see what happens. That's the main thing I want to leave you with. Thank you all so much for listening. We love doing this. We love doing it for all of you. And we will see you all next week.
Hey, Andy.
Yes, Lisa?
You ever sit around thinking about how Ren and Stimpy is the greatest Nicktoon ever?
I mean, I sit around thinking about how Rocco is and how Ren and Stimpy isn't even top 5.
Well, you're wrong, and now I challenge you to a fight to the death.
You know what? Let's mark that down as Plan B. Hey, gang, check out 90s Court Podcast, where each week Lisa and I discuss 2 things from the 90s that brought us great joy.
Or great cringe. We cover movies, TV, video games, music, toys, food, and so much more. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you podcast and catch up on a great backlog of 90s goodies.
And be sure and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at 90s Court, because it's 90s Court, and that means that you, the jury, decide who wins each week.
And if this podcast thing doesn't work out, I can always just murder Andy.
Please listen.